My name is Dr. Katherine Aron-Beller, and I teach Jewish history at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and the Tel Aviv University. So welcome this evening. It's great to have you with me. I'm very excited to have your attention for an hour. So tonight, we're going to talk about two aspects, the Italian Inquisition and the Jews. And to many of you, this must be a very strange an unusual combination. When you think of the Italian Inquisition or the Catholic Inquisition, you automatically think about Spain, about the Black Legend, or you think about Portugal and the Inquisition there, or of course, the New World. And then you think about the Anusim, the Conversos, those Jews who practiced their Judaism in secret, or the slang term marranos, which means swine in Castilian, and the terrible burnings of these secret Jews at the auto de fe, the act of faith as it was known in these times. Here you can see in this picture the burning of the secret Jews in the corner. But tonight I want to introduce you to a different story of a Catholic institution, of a Catholic Inquisition, and its relationship with Jews, this time professing Jews, Jews who practiced openly in Italy, and not those who had to hide their Judaism and live in secret. These Jews stood before a different type of inquisitional court in Italy, whose intention was not to persecute the Jews as much as to discipline them, to prosecute them for particular offenses and make sure that they knew their place in Christian society. And this, of course, is the Italy that we really love so much, that we've been dreaming about over these past few months. And I hope that I will be able to show you tonight how the Inquisition and its trials allows us a fascinating window into Jewish existence, particularly in the 16th and 17th centuries. So tonight, we are going to put together these two parts of early modern Italian society: professing Jews and the Italian Inquisition. And let me tell you that after 25 years of spending my research time in the Italian Inquisitional archives, I started my doctorate in 1995. I am really delighted to be able to share with you some of my findings. So I'm going to divide the hour that I have with you in the following way. I'm going to begin with a sort of preliminary discussion about the Inquisition, its treatment of Jews, and the extant sources that are available for research, as you can see here. And then I'm going to concentrate on the voices of the Jews who were brought before these courts in northern Italy, and what their voices, if we decode them, because of course we have to really decode them, they are after all standing before an inquisitor in a court, what this tells us about their lives, about their loves, and about, of course, the complex relationship that they had with the Christian society in which they lived. So after 25 years, it was quite difficult for me to decide what I was going to share with you in this hour. But I'm going to try, if I can, look at four aspects of Jewish life through these trials. I'm going to show you a little bit about the Jewish household, how it functioned in the 16th and 17th century in Italy. I'm going to introduce you to Viviano Sanguineti, a fascinating young Jewess who has an illicit flirtation and relationship with a young Christian from the balcony of her home. And really, this is a trial that deals particularly with her father, because he's the one that gets into trouble with the Inquisition because he dissuades her from baptism and from becoming a Christian. And also, we're going to move to the Jews' attitude and interaction with Christian images. What do I mean by that? Those of you, and I'm sure most of you who are listening to me tonight have been to Italy, have seen that pretty much on every street corner there is either a crucifix or an image of Mary, a place of devotion for the Catholics, the Christians, to really kneel before and pray. How did the Jews deal with that in their everyday interaction with Christians? That is something we will be discussing as well. And lastly, if we have time, I wanted to bring you a fascinating trial about exorcism, which of course is this sort of spiritual practice of evicting demons or other spiritual entities from a person. So this was a little Christian child who was supposed to be possessed, and how a Jew is called into her home and asked to really get rid of this devil or demon inside her. So we have a lot to do for our hour, and let's begin really from the outside. Let's look at the Inquisition as an institution. Now, it's the 16th century, and Western Europe, of course, is facing one of its most dramatic centuries in the history of religion. After centuries of absolute power in Rome, the popes, let's think of the Borgias, right? These are decadent popes. The papacy is a sort of a corrupt institution, and it's forced very much to rethink its power and its existence because of one man, Martin Luther, that you see here, and his Reformation. He proclaims a new faith, and he manages to cause a massive response among the German people in his favor. Now, it started, of course, around 1517, and soon it spreads through Europe. In France, we have, of course, Calvin. In Switzerland, we have Zwingli. And the papacy is threatened. It's feeling this threat of Protestantism. It's a new religion. It's always been, until this time, Catholicism. Yes, there have been a few heretics on the side, but nothing really threatening in the same way that the Protestant religion was in the 16th century. And although I would say nowadays, scholars don't really use the term counter-reformation to Luther's Reformation, this main comeback of the Vatican, of the papacy, really should be understood, and really for us needs to be seen as the papacy's strive to preserve Italy from the contagion of Protestantism by using repressive mechanisms of a newly established Inquisition. And this is really what we're going to be looking at. Although, yes, we can talk about a medieval Inquisition from far back, this is a reaction of the Counter-Reformation. And we need to define the Inquisition here as a papal court, a holy office as it was known. And this is really where the institution was in Rome. And here we can see it as the headquarters for the papacy. This is where all of the correspondence happens with the other holy offices, as they were known in other parts of northern Italy, and I'll tell you exactly where they are. So this is the place where all of the documents would be collected, all of the cardinals would be sitting here. The 6 cardinals in charge of the Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office are here. They're the ones who are deciding what's happening in the other inquisitions. And these holy offices very much spread through Italy. I wanted to share with you, of course, maybe one of the most famous trials against a famous astronomer in Italy, Galileo Galilei, that you see here in this 19th century reproduction of him standing before the Inquisition, trying to defend himself. Of course, he doesn't do a great job, and he goes into house arrest for the rest of his life. But this gives us a scene of the Inquisition in Italy. So these 6 cardinals in Rome send out orders and demands for regular updates as to what the courts are doing, and often decided in Rome on the punishments after they had seen notarized accounts of the trial proceedings. Local inquisitors, by the way, of course, are churchmen. In particular, we see a tendency for the churchmen to be Dominicans, as you've seen here, and they really were the inquisitors more than the Franciscans, and they were highly skilled communicators. Remember, not just in dominating inquisitions, but these are the monks who are also dominating medieval universities in Europe at this time as well. So it's 1542, and Pope Paul III, through his bull Licet ab Initio, creates a new Inquisition. Now, why? Protestants are infiltrating Italy. The popes are feeling threatened by this new religion. There's a strong feeling from the papacy that the church has to discipline Italian society to prevent this heresy from endangering Catholic society. And let's just remind ourselves what Italy is actually looking like at this time. Of course, it's really no more than a geographical expression, right? If we look at the boot, and we can see that the bottom half of the boot here is still under the control of Spain. So we're really not touching the Spanish Inquisition, although it's pretty active down here. What we're interested is in all of these states, which are sort of individual states, and how the papal state, which obviously with Rome, is really sending out inquisitors and holy offices to these other areas of northern Italy. So what we need to remind ourselves is that Italy is not a nation state as in the 16th and 17th century, as of course as it becomes in the 19th. And some parts are united politically with powers outside of Italy. So I've said already with the bottom of the boot with Spain, of course, and some of northern Italy here, as you can see, with Germany. And Italians of the period very much don't think of themselves as Italians, but they think of themselves as Florentines, as Venetians, as Modenese, Milanese, etc., etc. Okay, so this is really what Italy looks like. So the Pope is keen to feel that he's controlling religion in northern Italy. And here you can see is the list of the approximately 45 holy offices that we know really were existing at this time in the north of Italy. And each holy office has, of course, an inquisitor. He is the person who makes the final decisions. He's the one who's in charge. He has his vicar, or vicario as it was known. He does a lot of the administrative work, and when the inquisitor has a headache, he's the one that can conduct the interrogations. And then the notary, which in many ways for me is the most fascinating man, and I think for him, he's the one who's responsible for ruining my eyesight with his terrible handwriting. He writes down all the testimonies in the investigations. What's going on? What are people saying? How are they reacting? And what's interesting, and I've started now working on trials that are a little bit more modern, so I'm going into sort of the late 17th, 18th century. There's a sort of self-righteousness of the notary at this time who really starts thinking, well, you know what, I'm also going to have an opinion. And he adds things in brackets like, well, I don't think he's telling the truth, or things when he's actually writing down what people are saying in the courtroom. Interestingly enough, besides this rather sort of small group of people, and that's really because the Holy Office doesn't have a lot of money at this time and is limited in how much it can do in a place, the Inquisition also makes use of what's known in Italian as sort of familias, churchmen, local churchmen, who might be members perhaps of a local confraternity, to act as spies, to sort of walk around and feeling that they're working with the Inquisition and to notice things. Now, these familiars, let me give you an example, could be responsible perhaps for seeing a Christian servant come out of a Jewish home on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, with a bucket of water, and then that spy will go and tell the Inquisitor that he believes a Christian is working for a Jew, which is not allowed by the Inquisition. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Inquisition in Italy, a new court of the 16th century that sees itself as a disciplinary one in Catholic society. So, we know it's created in 1542. Our next question has to be, what's it got to do with Jews? What's it got to do with professing Jews, Jews who live openly as Jews? Well, at the beginning, I would say Jews were pretty hopeful that they would be immune from this new court. And then, unfortunately, 1581 comes. And I would say for the Jews of Italy, this is quite a sort of a watershed date as well. In 1581, with a particular sort of anti-Judaic pope, Pope Gregory XIII, this Catholic institution adjusts its own jurisdiction, which until now is only against heretics, and allows itself to start prosecuting practicing Jews, those Jews who are living openly, as I said before, in communities across northern Italy. And let me just reiterate here that I am not talking about Marranos. I'm not talking about Jews or secret Jews. Maybe they come from Spain or Portugal. They haven't quite decided if they're going to go and live in the Jewish community. And remember, by this time, they're ghettos already, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Or, nah, this is too limiting for me. You know what? I think I'm going to become a Christian. But then they become Christian, and they're supposed to be Christian, but the draw of the Jewish life, of their past, of their sense of community, and the liturgies, the way of praying that they have been accustomed to, is something that's going to attract them. So yes, we have a lot of people in Italy that are sort of crossing over between the two. But my research really just concentrates much more on the professing Jews. So this is 1581. Pope Gregory XIII, that you can see here in a depiction of him, creates this bull, Antiqua Eodorum Improbitas. Remember, the first three words of a papal bull gets the name of the bull. This bull is called the ancient wickedness of the Jews. And in this bull, the Pope authorizes and expands his authority to include practicing Jews, aware, I think, that many Italian rulers by this time have decided to tolerate Jews, not to expel them. There's been enough. There's a sense to which scholars think when Jews are being put in ghettos, and this is really, I think, very correct, that this is a sense that this is going to be their long-term home. This is not just another place in Europe that's going to expel the Jews. We've seen that already in England. We've seen it in Spain, we've seen it in Sicily, and in parts of Germany, France. But no, Italy has decided that Jews are worthwhile. Okay, we can talk, that's obviously another lecture, why Jews are so worthwhile and important in Italy. But this is the real sense that we have from the top. And the bull, the papal bull, Antiqua Eodorum Improbitas, clarifies not only that the inquisitional court was able to prosecute Jews for certain offences, but that it has the right to bring about corporal punishments or even harsher punishments of the Jews. And let me just show you a quote from this so you can see what's written here. Wherefore we, wishing to ensure that the purity of our faith is not defiled, nor the names of Christ and Christians mocked with impunity, have decided and declare that inquisitors of this heretical depravity have the power to proceed freely in all causes and cases as follows. Now, I'll tell you in a minute about what the cases are, but I want you to recognize here this word heretical depravity, because in our minds, surely Jews are not heretics. They're practicing a different religion, and yet what I see over and over again is this sense to which the popes are keen to move Judaism into this sort of heresy, this religion that is really connected with Christianity, but it's something that's negative, and therefore it needs to be watched and kept an eye on from those in charge. Now, through this bull, the Inquisition is now able to judge Jews for 10 offenses, including offenses against common beliefs shared by Christians and Jews. And these are, here you can see the list of offenses that Jews could be accused of by the Inquisition, and some of them, you can see, really represents common beliefs shared by Jews and Christians. In the first one in particular, denying belief in one God. If the Jew denied belief in one God, why should he? He also believes in one God. But anything that was crossing this theological issue was something that the Inquisitor could bring the Jew before its court for. Sacrificing to demons, causing Christians to dabble in diabolism, devil worship, to blaspheme Christians and to blaspheme Christ and the Virgin, to proselytize Christians, to encourage them to convert to Judaism is a sin, is an offense, and needs to be brought before the Inquisitor, to dissuade potential converts from baptism. Any Jew who's interested in converting to Christianity, if a Jew stops another Jew from doing that, he can be brought before the Inquisition. Sheltering heretics, possessing blasphemous books, and the censorship of the Inquisition is obviously a huge part of it as well. The censoring of the books. Remember, this is the century that we've seen also the burning of the Talmud already in 1553. So this sense to which the Jews have to be very careful about what is written in their books. If the Jews mock Christians in any way, if they mock Christ or the cross or any image of Christ, that becomes very important. And finally, Christian wet nurses in their homes. The Jews are not allowed to have any sort of servants in their homes serving them, because if they have a Christian serving a Jew, that is almost like sort of the opposite of the natural hierarchy. The Christian is at the top of the hierarchy. The Jew is almost like a sort of a second class citizen. Now, the contents of this bull was not original. Since the Middle Ages, definitely, there had been this general belief among theologians that the papacy could punish Jews. But I think the right way to see this, and the right way that we should think about this new sort of authority, this new jurisdiction that the Inquisition has over Jews, is that what was new was the fact that the papacy was now actively encouraging its recently re-established holy office to directly prosecute practicing Jews for these particular offenses. And what I find as I sit in the archives in different places really interesting is how, when I look at this list of 10 offenses, how very quickly the Inquisition sort of garners upon itself more jurisdiction and more ability to rule on different offenses. At first, of course, it punishes practicing Jews for these sort of alleged crimes against Christianity. But as scholars find out and have found out, it expands its authority to cover Jews' sexual relations between Jews and Christians. I'm working now on a sodomy case in particular, and that's from the 17th century. The Inquisition concerns itself with the size of synagogues as well. And this really increases over the next few centuries. For example, in Piedmont, that you see here in Torino, the Holy Office restricts Jewish trade and the number of doctors' licenses that the Jews are allowed to have. It deals with rental conflicts, the wearing of identifying the Jewish badge that the Jews had to wear, and even the supervision of Jewish cemeteries. In Spilato, in the Duchy of Modena, the Holy Office also tried to circumscribe the Jews' economic activities by really clamping down on rental, on acquisition of properties, and ownership of immovable property. In the Venetian Republic, I found cases that included an accusation that Jews had exhumed a woman in order to send her body to Sfat in the Holy Land. So as you can see, the Inquisition's authority widens. And now I think we need to think a little bit more about the Jewish communities in Italy, where they are, how they're doing with this, and day-to-day life. So let's look a little bit more at the Jewish communities. I want us to realize that 1581, what we have definitely are 4 ghettos already existing in Italy. Venice, the oldest ghetto, 1516. We have Rome. This is also another sort of a sketch of the Venetian Inquisition, of course, in Cano Reggio, in the northern part of the city-state. Here we have a picture of the Roman Inquisition. Interesting enough, it comes after the Venetian one. This is 1555. We also have an Inquisition already in Florence and Siena, both of which were created in 1571. So again, this fits with our understanding that the Jews are here to stay. Let's keep them in ghettos. And all other states, North Italian states at this time, that house Jews. So what are they? Let's include Ferrara, Genoa, Mantua, Milan, Modena, and Savoy, had still not segregated their Jews, despite the fact that Pope Paul IV, in his bull Cum Nimis Absurdum of 1555, when he created this ghetto in Rome, sort of really writes in his bull that he expects all the other Italian states to follow suit. I am the Pope. This is the way we are now going to conduct our relationship with the Jewish community. They now need to be in ghettos. So what does this really mean for our Italian Jews? Well, it really depended on where they lived. And even though the Pope in Rome is saying in 1581 that Jews are now subject to the Inquisition in Italy, holy offices, these inquisitions, are not able to deal uniformly in the whole of northern Italy because of this separation of Italy into its various states. And Jews have these sort of different rights and privileges and living arrangements, as we can see in each territory, established by secular governments, and were answerable to other judicial bodies besides the Inquisition. So let me take this a little further. We see, for an example, a difference in the way a Jew could be treated by the Inquisition in Rome and the way he could be treated by the Inquisition in Venice. In Rome, for example, in general, the prosecution and punishment of Jews was always harsher than in Venice, because you have the Pope really very much involved in what's going on in Rome. And then if we go somewhere like the Republic of Venice, which is pretty much a rather controversial place, because Venice is always getting into trouble with Rome. It's already been excommunicated 3 times. 1606 was the 3rd time that Venice was excommunicated by the Pope. What you see when you're looking at the Inquisition in Venice and its treatment of Jews, and anyway how it runs itself, there is present on that inquisitorial tribunal 3 officials from the government, and they keep an eye on what the Inquisition is doing. So that really tells you, I think, the very different institutions that you have in Venice and in Rome. But still, Jews are definitely threatened, and the establishment of the Holy Office in 1581 ushers in new complications and continual intrusion into their daily lives. Jews, practicing Jews, professing Jews, are summoned before the Italian Inquisition for full trials, often involving extensive periods of imprisonment from their arrest until their sentencing, occasional incidents of torture where the Jews are tortured by the inquisitors, and mostly pecuniary punishments. This is very important to realize that whereas the Spanish Inquisition, you have such terror because the Jews are terrified they're going to be burnt at the stake. What for me made these court cases and these trials so much more readable was the fact that, yes, the Jew is threatened, but he's not terrified. And therefore, the sense when you use the testimony, you feel that, there's a sense that, yes, you have to decode it, but there could be an element of truth in what Jews and Christian witnesses are saying. So let me say at this stage that most Jews are given fines when they're found guilty for something, light prison sentences sometimes. This could also involve house arrest, which means that the Jew would not be kept in prison as a punishment in the Inquisition, but he would be told he would have to stay in his house, a bit like what we have to do in Israel for the next 3 weeks. It's sort of a house arrest for us as well. Or very rarely, you might actually see sort of banishment from the city. But you do not find a Jew being burnt at the stake in Italy. Remember, this is a church court that has to rely on a secular one to carry out its sentences. And it was much easier for the Inquisition to demand a fine from a Jew and not to have to involve government officials to carry out any sort of corporal punishment. But one more thing I want to say about Jews before we start looking at some of these trials. And this, I think we should appreciate, particularly in a time when we really need to be very resilient because of what we're facing today. And every single time that I read a trial, I'm always impressed by a certain confidence that the Jew shows as he stands before the Italian Inquisition, knowing that his legal rights are going to be observed and that Jews can defend themselves. And this really makes me believe that there must have been, although I have no proof of this at all, some kind of confraternity established, or some sort of advisory board that counseled Jews from within the community as to how they needed to act when they stood before an inquisitorial court. For example, if we think about other confraternities that we definitely know that existed within the Jewish community, confraternity, how to see it as some sort of a group of people who come together with the same motifs. We know that the Matias Suim, the freeing of prisoners, was a confraternity in itself, the support of prisoners and the payment of their bail or fines to obtain their freedom. And if this sort of confraternity or this group existed, the support system within the Jewish communities existed, it could have provided information on how Jews had to appear before the Inquisition, what it was advisable to say, and to really sort of deal, I think, with the psychological and real pressures when Jews are standing before the Inquisition, wherever they lived. But of course, we now need to think about our sources. And without these, our knowledge of the Inquisition's actions would be greatly impaired. So what inquisitorial sources do we have? So let's start, of course, with Rome. Now we can visit the Archivio della Congregazione per la Dottrina della Fede, the archive, the main archive of the Inquisition. But unfortunately, what we have to realize is that much of this material up until the 19th century, unfortunately, has been lost. We can blame Napoleon for that and for his destruction of many of the archives throughout Italy. So we have a very, very limited amount of information and resources that we could find if we went to the papal archives of the Holy Office there. We do have 13 trials of Jews that are now housed in Trinity College in Dublin. We have, as you can see, 30 trials in the archive of the Inquisition in Siena. So that's definitely worthwhile going there. 25 trials in the state archives in Venice, which very helpfully have actually been transcribed by Pier Cesare Ioli Zorretini, and these he has transcribed in the original Latin and Italian, but definitely an easier way of getting access to these sources than flying to Venice at this time. We know that there are some interesting documents also on the Jews in the archives in Bologna, and that is, of course, until their expulsion in 1593. When Jews are expelled from Bologna, they are sent to Ancona and Rome. We also have more. We have some administration records in Ferrara. We have 30 proceedings in Pesaro. No trials, but some edicts in the Mantuan state archives. We have 2 cases in Savoy in the archives, 1 case in the Republic of Genoa. And then 4 volumes of the Florentine Inquisition, now held in the Ecclesiastical Archives of the General State Archives in Brussels. And this really houses some very substantial evidence about the Jews, particularly in Florence, Livorno, and Pisa, of course, all part of the Florentine Duchy from the late 16th to the late 18th century. But really, one of my favorite places to go, and some place that I'm so grateful that there is such a full archive, is the Duchy of Modena, where I started working on the inquisitorial trials 25 years ago. There are 393 trials there. So it really is a good place to go. They actually have all the trials. There are none that are missing, or none that we have to sort of blame Napoleon for. So I think that that's something to think about. And there are no cases, of course, for the Duchy of Milan. The Jews themselves are expelled from there in 1597. So just to give you a sense of what's available, you can see from here. And in terms of primary sources on Jewish life, and to hear the voices, to read the voices of ordinary Jews, I really hope that you can see to what extent the Inquisition archives in Italy are really gold mines. We can decode these sources and we can use them. So again, I say to you that even though, of course, the inquisitional courtroom is a place of conflict and not of passive registration of reality, Jews in general are not in life-threatening situations. Although some of them must have been nervous, and we can sense that often as well, most Jews are able to give clear testimony, thanks, of course, to the speedy handwriting of the notary. And I think now, since we're sort of halfway through our session together, we should move away from the institution, from the sources of what's available. And I'd like to share with you some really compelling stories of the behavior and thoughts of ordinary Jews living in Italy at this time. What can I tell you about 16th and 17th century Jewish life in Italy? Of course, Jews suffer from plagues just like then as we do today. But I promise you stories and inside information on Jewish life in Italy. And of course, I intend to do just that. So let's start with servants, Christian servants in the Jews' household in Italy in the early modern period. And I want to start with a fascinating case that I found in Venice. This is a case in 1579 when a Spanish visitor from Cordova in Spain, Don Ferdinando de las Infantes, comes before the Inquisition to report that he has seen a young black boy of about 14 wearing the yellow cap of the Jews, and he has seen him within the ghetto of Venice. A Jewish peddler had told the Christian, or so Don Ferdinando says. Remember, Don Ferdinando is the denouncer. He's the one who's bringing this information to the Inquisition. He's been told, he says, that Jews buy slaves in the markets in Constantinople and then circumcise them and make them, quote, of their own law and bring them into Venice. So, wow, this is big, this is important. What does this mean? The inquisitorial spies go into the ghetto, but they can't find this young man, but they do manage to find one Jew, and his name is Samuel Maestro, who is himself black. And when interrogated, he argues that he was the child of a well-to-do Jew in the ghetto by a middle-aged servant of Ferrara, who he says was neither black nor white, and was said to be Jewish herself. And he is released without punishment. But I want us to imagine some of the wealthy Sephardi merchants in Venice bringing slaves into their families and doing this with a certain amount of freedom in Venice, in their ghetto, and actually getting away with it. And it makes me think to what extent perhaps these Jews are imitating the non-Jewish high classes with their own sort of Orientalism at this time. Perhaps, but I think maybe what the trials really show us is that Jews holding slaves or servants or having any domination, of course, over Christians, even on a domestic level, is profoundly distrusted, and it really sets the Inquisition off, and this is something that it wants to look at. But one of the most really interesting discoveries I have made from these trials is how many Jewish households in Italy, in Renaissance and early modern Italy in particular, held Christian servants. And if we look at the sort of the wet nurse first and then sort of turn to more general servants, of course, this is a very expensive position in the Jewish household, and it's particularly wealthy Jewish bankers who employ Christian wet nurses to nurse their children. It's obviously crucial for the life of a newborn to be nursed. There's no materna or anything like that in 16th or 17th century. And if Jewish mothers refused to breastfeed, which it seems that they did, Jewish wet nurse were not always available. And again, we see that these wealthy Jewish women are basically copying the norms and the fashions of the Christian women around them, and they employ a Christian wet nurse. And we know that between 1400 and 1800, babies nursed by wet nurses was a particularly widespread phenomenon in Italy, where common opinion, where culture, socioeconomic, and even medical factors contributed to this sort of generalized rejection of maternal breastfeeding. And so I want you to see this bringing of a Christian wet nurse into a Jewish household really as sort of being a distinctive sign of Jewish upper classes, since it very much flattered the vanity of husbands, but also enhanced the Jewish mother's status as a fertile and prolific wife. And so in most wealthy Jewish households, and again, we know this because these women are often brought before the Inquisition, having to explain why they are working in Jewish households, we know that these Christian women lived in the Jewish household, that they nursed the Jewish babies exclusively for at least 6 months, and they took explicit orders from the Jewish mother, from the maternal figure, regarding what she could eat, and how much she should sleep as well. And what is also interesting is how the Christian wet nurses remain loyal to their Jewish masters, even after the inquisitors tell them to stop working for the Jews. These Christian women themselves have obviously put their own children out to another wet nurse in order to act as a wet nurse for the Jewish families as well. But they know in particular that they have good quality food and a good income from the Jewish household. But what about other types of servants in a Jewish household? Of course, I'm sure when you look at this picture, you think, what is she giving me a picture of Vermeer and Amsterdam? But just to give you the sense of what I think a sort of a Christian servant in other Jewish households would have looked like. This is the same time period. In Italian, they were called fogarole. They were sort of middle-aged, elderly women who would come into the Jewish household to light the fires for the Shabbat, to enable the Jewish family to have Jewish food. And often these women served more than one master, but it was definitely a way for these poor women to get extra income. And if we look at the trials, and when we hear these servants talking about what they're doing, and they explain, well, yes, I've prepared them, cleared the meals for the Jews, I've swept their house, I've emptied their chamber pots. Of course, there are no toilets at this time. They make wine for the Jews, they wash their dishes, and they make their beds. and carry groceries from the market to the house. So really not such earth-shattering duties, but really gives us a sense of this daily interaction between the Jew and the Jewish household and the Christian. So really, and also what I want you to see at this point, if I may, is the sense to which the Christian is going in and out of the Jew's household. And I think that that's important. There is this traffic. There's no sense that the Jewish household is a closed place to Christians. And this is really also includes even the Ghetto period as well. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to this fascinating trial that in many ways I think is really one of my most favorite moments of research in the past 25 years, that of Viviano Sanguineti. It's a trial about a Jewish woman who, in the archives in Modena, who in 1602 is betrothed to her first cousin, Michele Sanguineti, but she conducts a flirtation, this young Jewish woman, I would say she's perhaps 16 years old. She never actually is asked by the Inquisitor how old she is, which is one of those frustrating moments where if you knew her age, you might feel more confident. But I would put her around 14, 15, 16, which is the normal age in Italy for young Jewish women to be engaged or betrothed. And she has a Christian admirer. His name is Ludovico Mirandola. And she conducts a relationship with him from her balcony. So this, again, just to give you a little bit of background, this is Modena. Unlike Venice and Rome, this is 1602. Modena at this time does not have a ghetto. So Jews are really sort of living around the city. The ghetto is only erected in Modena in 1638. And it was this case in particular of Viviano Sanguineti that gives me an opening onto this certain aspect, I think, of Jewish-Christian relations on the eve of ghettoization, which is young love. So let's enjoy this trial and what happened for a moment. So from 1598, which is actually the date when the Inquisition is established in Modena, I found 18 trials for dissuasion of baptism. And this really is what this trial is about. Miriana is the young Jewish girl who has a flirtation with a Christian, but it's her father, Viviano Sanguineti, who is in charge, who is in trouble with the Inquisition and is brought before the Inquisition and kept in prison. There are, as I said, 18 trials of dissuasion of baptism at this time. And I think this really clarifies for us that the Inquisition is nervous that Jews are trying to protect their own from conversion to Christianity. Remember that this is the Counter-Reformation papacy that is trying to achieve the conversion of Jews by kindness and not by force. And you see this particularly because everywhere where there is a ghetto, there is what's known on the outside of a ghetto, a casa de catechumeni, which is a house of converts, where if Jews wanted to convert, it was basically a place of sanctuary, a place where Jews could go, Muslims as well, if they were interested in converting to Christianity. It was like a safe house, and it was here that they would be catechized and taught about Christianity before their baptism. And it's very interesting that the popes put these houses on the outside of the ghettos with this hope that always Jews are going to be interested in converting. And also, if you think about another aspect of this sort of pressure by the papacy to try and get the Jews to convert, is this tendency for the papacy to demand that Jews would go to forced sermons on Shabbat afternoon that would be given by converts, Jews who had become Christians and had a background in Judaism and Judaic studies, and then be able on a Shabbat afternoon to give a sermon that would be based on the Parsha, on the weekly portion that had been read by the Jews in that morning, but to turn it and to make it into a Christian sermon. And just on the outside of this very famous oratory on the ghetto, on the outside of Rome, of course, is this famous quotation in both Latin and Hebrew, which really is addressed to Jews, that they should read it and realize that they are an obstinate people who should naturally want to convert to Christianity. So that's really the background here. The pressure is on. And here we have Viviano Sanguinetti, who really is in trouble with the Inquisition because he's stopping his daughter from converting to Judaism. So it's not really Mirjana herself that's in trouble, it's her father, Viviano. But before I tell you more about Mirjana, I want us to think about balconies. Balconies in Italy. Let's say something about balconies. This is a time, as I said to you before ghettoization, when outside windows of Jewish homes are supposed, still don't have to be closed off. This is going to happen at the time of ghettoization, but at this moment, I want you to imagine Viviano Sanguinetti here. You can see the ghetto in Venice, the outside windows were closed off, but let's maybe go to Juliet's famous balcony as she looks down at Romeo from her balcony, and put Mirjana there instead, a Jewess who is looking out of her window, looking down and bringing about a flirtation with a Christian young man who passes her balcony. The place of meeting is the balcony. And the question is, why is Mirjana spending so much time on her balcony? Well, at the beginning of the 17th century, depending on the economic status of the family, wealthy Jewish women spent most of their time within their household. They weren't allowed to walk casually through the streets of the town in which they lived. Social and economic identity was very much associated with the household, and a Jewish woman, was expected to spend most of her time inside that household. Respectable women, in fact, both Jewish and Christian, had no reason for spending time in the local piazze or in markets. It was supposed to be a safe space, and the question is, was it, if this relationship was conducted by Mirjana? And Christian neighbors or their servants would see these young Jewish women at their balconies as they passed through the piazze, as so often happened when they entered the Jewish home, perhaps if they were bringing deliveries. We said before, you have Christian servants coming in and out of the Jewish household. And what one senses when you look at this trial is a sort of a major flirtation rather than a full-blown relationship, an infatuation by a Christian that leads the young man, Ludovico, into the false belief that he could enhance his own personal and economic status and win this wealthy Jewish daughter of a banker in Modena, leading her onto dangerous paths, so dangerous, in fact, that she herself pulls back from the relationship and does not run off with her Christian admirer. And the question is, what is stopping her? Why does she not do it? Well, of course, it's difficult to know for sure. She's obviously not going to tell the Inquisition why she decides not to run off with a Christian admirer. And I want to say again that we know that she's engaged at this time to her first cousin. Could there be some discomfort there? She doesn't really want to marry her first cousin. This is quite common among Jewish communities, particularly at this time, that you had these consanguineous marriages of families marrying within themselves. So Mirjana is called before the Inquisition. She's terrified, and she hardly is able to say a word. She does everything she can to try and convince the Inquisitor that she changed her own mind, and it was not down to the disciplining of her father. So let's surmise that she decided to back down herself. And the question is, why would she do that? And I want to suggest that I think, having read this trial many times, that Mirjana herself is an intelligent woman, and that Ludovico is a dubious character. And she can't really trust Ludovico. She's worried. What's he going to do if she leaves that balcony? Can she really know what it's going to be like beyond that Jewish household? And so she doesn't. She stays, and we know from other sources that she does marry her first cousin, Michele Sanguineti, and remain in Modena. Interestingly enough, Ludovico Mirandola, when he gets called before the Inquisition, he says that he'd done everything he could to really do it in the right way, to present her with rings, with strong Christian motives, a gold crucifix ring and a ring sculpted with the Madonna of Reggio, in token of the fact that he was trying to convert her, as well as promising her that his intentions were sincere. But what we see is that really Viviano Sanguineti, he's the one who's in trouble. He's put in prison, and one of his 2 interrogations, he is very clear that yes, he was doing what every Jewish father would do to stop this unheard of relationship. He says, I suspected that my daughter had said she wanted to convert. I begged and pressed her not to convert, but to persevere in the Jewish laws into which she was born. I told her to court only her intended, to whom she was promised, and no other. So here we have very much Viviano defending himself. In the end, he is fined. He has to pay 76 scudi, and he's told that in the future he must not dissuade baptism. I just want to say one more thing about this case, and I think it's very lucky for Viviano Sanguineti that this case happens when it does. The House of Converts in Modena is not opened until 1700, which means that Viviano Sanguineti does not yet have this safe place where she could naturally run to and feel that she's getting the official support of the conversionary process in her local town. And maybe that was the reason that she doesn't make and take that very courageous but very dangerous step of actually converting. And of course, and I'm sure all of you are thinking about this, and I just wanted to share with you, these are obviously some of the beautiful wedding rings that belonged to the Jewish community. I always think about one of these young Jewish brides wearing this ring as she does the washing up, and then remembering that this is something that they would wear at the wedding day, and it wasn't a ring that they would wear more than that actual ceremony. But of course, and there is a lot of similarities, and I'm sure you were all thinking about Shylock and his daughter Jessica, who very much in many ways reflects this case. But the difference, I think, of course, is that Jessica really, she is sort of wooed by Lorenzo, and she actually has this desire to leave her father, who in many ways, and we could do a whole discussion about Shylock, is not the easiest of fathers to have. Okay, I have a few minutes left. I'd like to sort of turn to 2 other aspects of my research, if I may. I want to share with you something that I'm working on more recently, which is really trying to understand the Jews' interaction and daily relationship with Christian images. And what I've found in the trials so far is over 70 cases of Jews who are accused of desecrating Christian images. Now, these could be images, as I say, within the homes of the Jews. Now, just think about it for a moment. Jews moving into a home by the 16th, 17th centuries. These images are everywhere. They're saturated. They're not just on the outside corners of buildings, as you can see here. And I wanted to give you sort of a real variety, and to think for a moment how many different sort of corners we've seen in Italy where we see these images. So not just in the home, but also Jews are accused of stoning, attacking, and not taking off their hat when a procession passes through the streets of the city. The Jew is not showing the respect, and he can get called to the Inquisition and fined and told that in the future he has to either run away and hide so that he won't see this very often repeated processions that go through the main streets of the town. And you also have accusations against Jews for holding, say, I said here, sort of small crosses or devotionalia of Christians in their pawnbroking establishments, which was not supposed to happen. So the Counter-Reformation in many ways is, I would say, in Italy, is about the papacy taking control of imagery, of Christian image. Remember also sort of Protestantism was so against images, and the whole idea that Protestantism is a form of iconoclasm and the breaking of images, that the Counter-Reformation is keen that within Italian society, images are respected, but they are controlled by the Inquisition and by the papacy as well. And this is something that the Jews really get themselves into trouble for, and you see it over and over again. One thing that I found also, and this was something that I found really interesting, like, what do Jews say every time they walked past a Christian image? Like, they must have said something. And there's a sense to which it's very uncomfortable to be in this sort of idolatrous place where all the time these religious images are around you, where twice a day you have the Ave Maria, where the Christians are supposed to kneel before these images. How do Jews deal with it? So interestingly enough, I came across another case of dissuasion of baptism. And it was this neophyte by the name of Giacomo Grisoffi. Now, he himself, by neophyte, means that he had converted to Christianity. But sometimes these converts are very interesting in their testimony because they let us see exactly what the Jews do, and they're open about it in a way, obviously, that Jews who might be sort of self-protecting themselves wouldn't admit about certain things that they've done before the Inquisition. So he says, well, in fact, when the Jews come or outside or see the Christians kneel before an image, they say a certain verse, as you can see here, from Psalms, from the Tehillim, right? And here he gives it, you can see it here in Latin, but then he sort of tries to explain it in the Hebrew, right? That we are, as I say here, means that those who kneel, the Christians, you are the small ones because you're kneeling, unlike those others, as in we the Jews, who stand on foot and are being raised in the grace of God. And we should think this is an incredible thing. We are looking at this document of the 17th century, and now, for the first time, we understand what Jews used to utter under their breath when they saw Christians kneeling towards Christian images. So there, that is as well. I promised you exorcism. I can see that I'm running out of time. I hope it's okay with you if I share with you this last trial. It's interesting because, again, we're returning to Venice, and I wanted to end with this because I think it's a side of Jewish magic that you don't often see that much in the Inquisition, but definitely this sense to which Jews and Christians come together to try and sort out a specific case. It's a fascinating trial, a case of a Sephardi Jew being called into the house of a Christian silk spinner to exorcise his goddaughter, who is possessed by spirits. Now, it occurred in 1584, and we see a Christian neighbor of the Christian spinner, denounce the Christian spinner for allowing a Jew, a Sephardi Jew, to carry out the exorcism, which really should, of course, have been carried out by the Catholic priest and not by a Jew. Now, so when the spinner comes before the Inquisition, he's unable to name the Jews who had done this case of exorcism. All he does is testify that he knows that they are Sephardi Jews and not Italian or Ashkenazi Jews. And what he can supply are only physical descriptions. They are Spanish Jews, he said. They wore turbans. They had a black slave. There you go, another case of a black slave. And whether he does this to protect the Jews or not is questionable. But for me, the trial confirms, I think, that the Christian belief that it is a Jew who can help him with the exorcism of his daughter is really fascinating. And look at this prayer that he says the Jew made over the girl. I exorcise you through the God of the Christians and through the God of the Jews, and through the saints of the Christians and through the saints of the Jews to come outside the body. And here, in the depth of exorcism, there is this common prayer that brings Jews and Christians together to solve the problem. And the problem was solved. I mean, that really is clear. But unfortunately for us, again, the Jews, with a physical description, we don't know who they are. They're not called before the Inquisition. And that's something that you really feel is very much when you're looking at the Venetian trials. You never quite get to the bottom of it. You can almost picture in your mind those three government officials standing in the inquisitional court and stopping the inquisitors really getting to a deep understanding of what's going on inside the ghetto, and really where are those black servants who have now been circumcised and those exorcists who are helping Christians as well. And in a way, I think then this is a good point to conclude. What we have seen above all, and I hope you will agree with me, is, as I say here, this sort of the disciplinary tactics of an early modern Inquisition, but also a local convivencia, a local coexistence, economic, we've seen it with the use of servants, social, between the religious, the flirtation of a Christian with a Jew, religious as well in terms of what Jews say before Christian images, and of course this exorcism as well, that goes a long way, I think, to explain how well Jews fared for themselves in early modern Italy, and perhaps even explains their longevity in Italy. Remember, Jews have been living in Rome from the 2nd century before the Common Era, and of course are still there today. So, and also, if we're looking at the Inquisition as an institution, I want us to see it different from Spain, different from Portugal, that here in Italy, under the watchful eyes of a papacy that, remember, has seen what's happened in Spain, this horrific problem in Spain with a number of conversos, secret Jews. It's a mess. Let's do things differently in Italy. Let's not forcibly baptize our Jews. Let's invite them. Let's make conversion something that they want to do through kindness, right? So the Inquisition really remains a disciplinary court rather than a persecutory court. And the difference, of course, is paramount, I think, to Jewish resistance. And one more thing, and I'm sure some of you must be thinking about this, and obviously this really is, I would say, one of the last cases of the Italian Inquisition and its contact with Jews. If we think about Eduardo Montara, the 6-year-old little boy who lived in Bologna with his parents in the 1850s, who was secretly baptized by his Christian nanny, by his Christian servant who was in the house at that time. Obviously, the most tragic story that we know, David Kurtzer has done incredible research in bringing this story alive for us. Here we can see him as a very well-known, renowned priest. He died, I think, just during the Second World War. He only met his Jewish family once or twice in his life. I think this was the second meeting. You can see that he has become a priest. He was taken from his Jewish home and he was made a Christian because the Inquisition said that the nanny, and the nanny herself admitted that she had secretly baptized Eduardo when he was 6 years old, and she feared that he was going to die. So thank you very much, and I'm passed back to you, Doran.
Wow, thank you very much. There are many, many compliments and thanks and blessings in the chat, as well as many questions. We won't have time for all of them. Please excuse the ones that I'll skip over. Steve asked, is it the case that anti-Judaism in Italy never became racialized, l'impresa di sangue, as it did in Spain?
I would argue very much so. Yeah, the racial anti-Semitism that you see in Spain is very much connected to the converso problem, to the conversos trying to hide their genealogy. You never have the intensity and the fear that you do with that issue in Italy, which again, for me, I think explains why these are not the sort of documents that you have to worry too much about when you're looking at them. You have a sense that there is a realism, that there is a sense of proof, that there is a sense of justice in what's going on.
Thank you very much. As I said, there are many, many compliments, and people are still saying thank yous. I'll absolutely send you the transcript for the chat so you can read them all. Rabbi Gary Gantz, I hope I pronounced that correctly, asked, how did you develop your interest in this topic?
I think I needed to find something. First of all, possibly I will put it down to my late father, who was a Holocaust survivor. And I was always, when I grew up, I was always very troubled by Jewish persecution. And I knew that it was something that would interest me. I knew that being a child of a Holocaust survivor meant that I had to choose something that was not connected to the Holocaust, because obviously you can't study something that you are so connected to. I was interested in anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. I teach a lot of anti-Semitism, and to be able to look at definitely a court that has the reputation of being anti-Semitic, but to use it and to actually be able to hear the voices of the Jews who are brought before that court, I think gave me a great sense of purpose. These are Jews that should be heard. These are Jews that have stories like we have stories. And it was great to be able to continue to have that exposure in the archives.
Thank you very much. Jennifer asked, do the archives work together and do they share information?
Absolutely, and they're very, very helpful. Obviously, you can. The amazing thing is you can go to Rome and you can look at the correspondence between Rome. Then you can go to local archives and you can see the responses. You need to be able to travel around. You need to try and be able to follow. Sometimes, remember, inquisitors, they find out that somebody has escaped to a different part of Italy, so the trial literally gets sent from a local court to a different court, whoever's dealing with it at that time. And you sense that sometimes. The inquisitors were very good at copying what they wrote. So you would see in particular, sometimes I think, oh, wow, I found this trial, which is sort of 300 pages long. And then I realized that sort of, 100 pages is sort of a copy of some of the other parts of the trial, because there's no photocopiers at this time. But the sense is you need to be able to send this information on to the next court in order for them to have that information.
Thank you very much. I've got to tell you about a conversation. I guess it bothered, or rather frustrated, a lot of people when you mentioned that the Christian workers would make the wine, which obviously makes it unkosher to whoever observes that. And so they said, is that true? How could that be? A lot of people asked about that. Is there anything you can add to that conversation?
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Italian Jews drank non-kosher wine. Now that is something that's up in dispute. We know that it happened. We know that Rabbi Leon de Modena complained about it. And we know that Jews at certain times tried to rectify it. But Italian wine was drunk, from what I can see, and from the amount of it from the trials themselves, that Jews did drink non-kosher wine that was made by non-Jews, if that's, we can call that in particular non-kosher wine.
Thank you. Judy asked, was the dispensation of most of these trials a fine? And if so, wasn't that somewhat of a money-making enterprise for the church?
Absolutely. And if you look at some of these financial statements, I would call them, of the Inquisition, you see to what extent they're actually relying sometimes on the Jews, on the wealthy Jews. I had this idea that maybe I could try and work out to see the extent to which wealthy Jews are brought before the Inquisition more often than poor Jews. Because I really sensed to which case this was a way of the Inquisitors making enough money to create their own buildings, to make themselves sort of much more comfortable financially, and to live more comfortable lives, often at the expense of Jews. But on the other hand, and I really want to stress this is a court which really relies on proof, that relies in general on being able to confirm for sure that the Jew is guilty. So I don't want to go too far with that prognosis.
Thank you very much. Once again, I'd like to apologize to those who I couldn't read all of the questions. So if their question wasn't asked, I apologize again. We have time for one last question, at the end of which, at the end of your answer, I will open microphones so people can say thank you personally. Again, there are so many compliments and thank yous in the chat in Shana Tova that I will absolutely send you the transcript. So the last question is, how would you compare the Italian with the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions?
Well, it's a great question. In my mind, the most ferocious of the Inquisitions is, of course, the Portuguese. We see that in particular, really, really ferocious, nasty, nasty Inquisition. Those of you who've been to Portugal know, and you can see the places in the north of the country where the conversos with the secret Jews would run, hide away from the Inquisition, which was very much based in the south of the country. I would put the Spanish second, obviously, also nasty, but more, I see it as sort of having different stages of its history. You have periods when it definitely persecutes the conversos in particular, then it moves to witches. So also you don't have this sense of it being ruled by evidence and proof and belief that you feel is particularly strong in the Italian. So the Italian, in my mind, and I think I've really been saying this, I do apologize for how many times I feel like I'm saying this, the Italian is the mildest in terms of what I've seen. It is the most didactic, and it's led by evidence and reason in particular.
Thank you so much. I'm opening the microphones now so that everyone can say thank you personally, and see you all in our next event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rabah, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much. In New Jersey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Toronto, Canada.
Thank you.
Great job, Sarah in New York. Fantastic.
Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
Thank you from Ottawa.
Very much.
Thank you from Michigan.
Thank you from Philadelphia.
Thank you from Jerusalem.
Boston area.
Thank you
Thank you from
San
Ottawa.
Francisco. Thank you from Teaneck.
Thank you very much from Boston area too.
Thank you from
Thank you from
Atlanta.
Thank you from Kibbutz Alumim.
From Joburg, Kathy.
Thank you from Ohio.
Florida.
From
Thank you from
Hadassah.
Thank you very much from Spain.
My pleasure.
Molto grazie from Kfar Saba.
Thank you from Jerusalem.
Molto grazie.
Thank you, Kathy.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Ellen. Nice to see you.
Dr. Catherine, just curious, do you speak 3 or 4 languages?
Yes, I think it's different parts of your brain is good at, I'm better at translating than I am at speaking. I need to go and sit in the archives for about 6 or 7 months, and then my Italian gets good enough. So yeah, that's something I need to do in the future. Please go.
Merci beaucoup du Canada.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
Could you
all
post
so
that
much.
again, please,
Have a
Daron?
wonderful, healthy, sweet New Year. Thank you. We'll see you all in the next event.
Daron, could you post that one more time, please, before you turn us off?
Absolutely. With
Thank
pleasure.
you.
With pleasure.
Great job, Kathy.
From Modena, Shana Tova.
Evans. Thank you very much from Spain.
My pleasure.
Dr. Beller, I have a quick question. I was wondering, why do you think that Italy was able to release records from their Inquisition? Right, the Vatican was able to, or willing to release the records from the Inquisition, but is unwilling to release records from the Holocaust.
Right, it's very different. I mean, that's its modern, that's its modern stance, and then I think that Pope Francis will be very different. I think he is having problems, obviously, with what happened with Pius XII and that and everything else. But in terms of the it's really fine, and it gives us access to the trials without problems.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you all. Good night from Jerusalem. Laila Tov.